Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a look at the things that the government can do. So here we have our territory, we have our population, we have our government, of course, that institution that makes and enforces public policy like laws. And of course, we have sovereignty, absolute power within our own borders. And then, of course, we have the government is able to do a couple of different things. One, it's able to execute an air of power towards the population. Number two, it has authority, the right to rule. And number three, it has legitimacy, the people's belief that has the right to rule. So let's look at these three things a little more close. And what this does is it allows the government to actually do what it does within a state, the power, legitimacy, and authority. Okay. We're going to start by looking at me. And I want to thank you very much for letting me be your teacher. Yes, that's a unicorn. Leave me alone. Now, couple things. Why are you actually letting me teach you? You ever think about that? Like, what gives me the ability to get people to behave even when people don't really want to behave? What gives me the right to teach? What makes you believe that I can actually teach you? And then finally, how far does my teaching authority actually reach? Well, states actually ask the same question, but now let's just bring it down to me as a teacher level. Let's take a look at the first thing, which is known as power. So, governments and schools can get people to behave in certain ways. And that is what power is, it's the ability to rule. Now, how do schools use power? Well, they'll give you things like disciplinary referrals and assigned detentions, suspend people. They use grades. Grades are a form of power. Grades can incentivize you to do certain actions. And of course, things like graduation. Hey, if you don't get a certain grade, you're not going to be able to graduate if you don't pay your fines, those kinds of things. This is how schools can use power to get you to behave in different ways. Guess what? States use power too, but we don't want you to think of the military as the state using power because the military should never use its power within the state. The military's job is to keep other states from destroying the sovereignty and the government of our state. So the state should never use military as a form of power against itself. Okay. Instead, how does a state use power? Well, it enforces laws. It protects citizens through the use of the police and sheriff and CHP and that kind of thing. Number two, it actually pays for programs and that can actually influence how people act. So things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, defense, education, power can be used by spending money on certain things. Obviously, the act of voting. People vote, and that's a form of power because you can actually influence where your country goes based on how you vote. So, voting is a form of power. And then, of course, the state can take actions like Operation Warp Speed. So, when former President Trump executed Operation Warp Speed, what it did is it brought hundreds of millions of doses of vaccines in very fast time, and it allowed the company or the country to open up and become more economically sound quicker. Okay. Number two, authority. Authority is the right to rule. Now we're talking about now the ability. Now we're talking about what gives people the right to actually rule. So, for instance, what gives the school the right to do what it does? Well, number one, California's education code actually says that what a public school can do and that it's a legal and legitimate entity. Number two, in terms of me, what gives me the authority to actually be a teacher? Well, the state of California has a teaching credential that I have successfully received, and that document says, well, this person can be a legitimate teacher. Finally, like, do you even know if I know government or economics? Does the school know? And how does the school never actually asked me, do you know government economics? They never tested me on it. What they did is they saw that I had a credential in the form of a degree, a bachelor's degree, and that says that, well, man, you must be legit. That gives you the authority to, because I guess because you have that document. Well, states have authority too, and the number one form of authority is a constitution. Obviously, the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of California, it gives the states the right to rule because within the document it says what a state can actually do and the laws it must follow. Okay. So that's it. That's what gives people the right to rule. It's usually some kind of founding document like a charter or constitution. The next one is the most important aspect of what of government, and that is legitimacy, and that is the people's belief that the government has the right to rule. So, like when you come to school voluntarily, you engage in school because you believe that school has the right to do what it does. Now, what gives school legitimacy? Well, the fact that it's been around for a long time. This is the old Ukiah Grammar School going back into the early 1900s. So there's been public education in Ukiah for a long time because that's how it's always been. You see it as legitimate because it's still here, it's still around. Number two, you enjoy actually being here. There are activities that are done, rallies, homecoming, clubs day, sports, that kind of thing. And you look at it and go, oh, that's kind of legit. I enjoy being here. And so I believe they have the right to do what they do. You have people that work within the institution that you happen to like, that you see as like good at whatever they do. If there's an administrator, a custodian, a teacher, a staff member, a librarian, where you're like, "Now that person actually seems like they care for me. They're a good teacher. They're a good staff member. They're legit in my mind." And they school keeps you safe. It has rules, and if the school keeps you safe, you see them as legitimate. If there's a lot of fights on campus, you feel threatened, bullied, then you see that the school has less legitimacy. States have the same thing. When a state's been around a long time, so the United States has been around for 200 plus years, almost 300 years, you look at them and say, ah, you're legit. I see you legitimate as a state. I believe you have a right to rule because you've been doing it for over 200 years. Um, Progress, economic growth, going forward, innovation. When countries move forward and progress and seem like they're doing better and better and better, that gives the state legitimacy. Economic growth, especially. Okay, leaders. If there are leaders, just like with schools, if there are leaders you think they like the people care about you, that you should be proud of being an American or a member of whatever state you're in. This is why Obama and Reagan were both often very popular. They made people like proud to be Americans. And finally, like the idea of we the people, that you like the state's legitimate because it does what we ask them to do through things like free and fair elections. Okay. So legitimacy is super important. Last one is sovereignty. This is supreme and ultimate power or authority within a territory, and you always want to use that supreme and ultimate power. So government, in this case, a democratic government, has supreme power within the borders of the United States. Now, what about the school? What gives the school sovereignty? Well, if you take a moment, think about it, your answer should be the school doesn't have sovereignty. The school does not have absolute power within its own defined territory like the campus or the school district. No, Ukiah High School actually still has to follow the school district rules, the city rules, the county rules, the state rules, the US federal laws, and ultimately the United States Constitution. So there's no sovereignty. The power that I have does not like not only does it not go outside of this classroom, there are things in this classroom that I can't break, all these different laws and codes. Now, what gives the country sovereignty? What gives a state sovereignty? Now we have the military. The military prevents other entities from the outside coming into the country and executing their power, overthrowing the government or invading the territory or killing the people. All right. So the military ultimately gives a state sovereignty. So in the end, what gives me the ability to make people behave a certain way? That's power. That's the ability to rule. What gives me the right to teach? That's my authority. That's the right to rule. What makes you believe I can teach you? That's legitimacy. That's you believing I have the right to rule. And how far does my teaching authority reach? Obviously, nowhere. So I don't have any sovereignty. A state works the same way. Government's ability to get you to do something, power. What gives the government the right to rule? Authority. What makes you believe that the government has the right to rule? Legitimacy. And how far did that government power extend? That's sovereignty. One quick thing. people often look at this word power and they think it's bad. Power is not bad. Power can be bad, but power doesn't have to be violence. Power is an action that the government takes. So if the government is saying, look, we're going to make public education free, that's a form of power. We're going to make school lunches free, that's a form of power. We're going to make more roads so people can get from point A to point B easier. That's a form of power. Now, can power be we're going to defend the nation? We're going to use our military power? Of course it can. But I don't want you to think that power is bad. Power is a government action to get people to behave in a certain way. That can be laws, that could be foreign aid, that could be all kinds of things that, in fact, most power is not bad. Power can be bad, but for the most part, it's just the idea of getting people to behave in a certain way. Right? Power, authority, legitimacy, sovereignty, the PALS. See you next time.